radiotoday.co.uk.
At the Radio Festival.
We're here at the Radio Festival and I'm joined by Andy Parfitt, who's the controller of BBC Radio 1 and 1 Extra and probably lots of other titles to your name these days. You're looking after pop, I think, aren't you?
That's right. Yeah, popular music as we call it.
How are you finding this year's Radio Festival so far? Some good sessions?
It's great. I saw my colleague Bob Shannon kind of being grilled by some journalists upstairs. He did very well. I think it's kind of nice touch. The kind of I think it's it happens in Edinburgh every year that the controllers of the national networks kind of get a kind of Q&A session. That was good. I think most significantly is that the day kicked off with representatives from the BBC, Tim Davie, Ashley Table from Global, Andrew Harrison, and so on, Bauer. I think it's the first time for some years that actually the key players in radio in the UK are together debating the kind of real challenging issues, not for kind of our individual sectors of radio, but for radio in itself. And I think the challenges are significant, and it's good to see that.
And I suppose perhaps relief in some respect that panel all said no to selling off Radio 1 and Radio 2.
Well, it's one of those kind of perennials, isn't it, that comes around, and it's kind of an easy thing to say, and it kind of lodges in some people's minds. But, as you heard, and as I know, nobody wants it. Government doesn't want it. Commercial radio doesn't want it. Obviously, the BBC doesn't want it. That's not what this is about. I think what Ashley said, actually, I agree with. Well, some of what he said I agree with, and some of it I don't. Some of what he said was wrong.
He said you were playing a lot of similar music to what he plays on his capital stations.
Yeah, and that's not right. But the points that he was making about we're here to fulfill our public service remit, and I'm absolutely confident that we do that day in, day out, week in, week out. That's what we do. And we're here to operate in a landscape together. Commercial radio, Radio 1. Radio 1, the Trust has said, should move slightly younger, and that's indeed what we're doing. Over the last year, we've done a number of really important schedule changes and initiatives to do that, to support new British music. I agree.
There was a challenge from Ashley,
we are in loud agreement at a high level. And then we're absolutely not in agreement about the details of the execution of that.
So there was a challenge from Ashley to say, OK, Radio 1 break 10 new British bands next year. I suppose you would argue that you do that every year anyway.
Well, every year anyway, and way more than 10. I mean, our support for new music is well documented. The stats, whichever way you look at it, Radio 1 is distinct musically. But I don't want to get, I don't want to get drawn into one of those tit-for-tat commercial versus BBC thing. I think, at the highest level, what we have here is a broad agreement between commercial radio and the BBC about moving radio forward, moving it to digital, and that's good news, and good news for the Radio Festival.
We learned from the interview with Bob that he's spoken to Chris Evans about the comments Chris made on Richard Bacon's show last week in respect of your breakfast show presenter. Have you spoken to Mr. Moyles about it as well?
Well, I only spoken to Chris Moyles in the sense of to repeat what he knows very well, is that I'm extremely happy with him at Radio 1. He's just a few months into a brand new contract. He continues to perform brilliantly. He reaches single-handedly something like 28% of all 15 to 24-year-olds in the UK every week. I mean, it's a phenomenon. He's one of radio's virtuoso presenters. He's very happy, I'm very happy, and we move on.
Were he and you surprised by the level of media interest in his rant, should we call it?
Well, I mean, it's interesting. I think that people who know the show and people who know Chris's style and know particularly what happens in that first half hour, it wouldn't have been any surprise. But he's a very, very famous presenter. He was giving, I'm on record saying it wasn't the best programme that I've heard Chris Moyles make. However, he hadn't been paid for a couple of months, and my job was to make sure that we corrected that and he was get paid. But I have a very, very good working relationship with Chris. He understands absolutely what we're trying to achieve at Radio 1, and I understand him as a presenter, so everything's okay.
Bob was just talking about the range of ages of presenters he has on his network, on 2, from the octogenarians he's got to the Zoe Balls and all those former Radio 1 Breakfast Show presenters. Have you pleased that you've got a similar range? I'm saying, Chris and Scott are at the older end of what you do.
Well, I mean, of course, Annie Nightingale has just celebrated 40 years of broadcasting uninterrupted on BBC Radio 1. It would be kind of inappropriate for me to speculate how old Annie is, but she's certainly, well outside or way outside the demographics of Radio 1. However, what does that tell you? It tells you that actually, age in physical years doesn't define your ability or otherwise to connect with an audience that's young or or the kind of music that's young. So I kind of take that, we have to understand that. I mean, the late and great John Peel was, well into his later years when he was still broadcasting and doing that really well. So, but you can't have Radio 1, which is a station full of that. So we have, we've Tom Deacon, Matt Edmondson, Annie Mac, and so on. Greg coming into to daytime, former kind of student radio winner. So it's a balance. I'm kind of there with Bob. It's a balance, but with Radio 1, the balance does have to be towards discovering new talent and encouraging and nurturing that. And I think that's a tough job that we do, and we're pleased to do it. But it happens at a slightly slower rate than some people think that it might. So, for example, Chris Moyles had been on Radio 1 for some years in a variety of slots before he moved to breakfast. So he became a Radio 1 presenter. So that's how it rolls.
Thanks, Andy, and enjoy the rest of the festival.
No, I will do. Nice to talk to you.
Cheers.
radiotoday.co.uk. At the Radio Festival.